This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We have a lot more people signed up, but they're not here yet, and in the interest of time, we want to get started. You're not going to hear anything through this microphone. It's just for NHTV, whom I want to thank. They are always there for us whenever we need something taped, and this way the folks at home will be able to watch it as well. I want to know why nobody's sitting up here. I have showered. I have perfume on. Every day this week I did that. There's nobody sitting here. Do you want to move forward, or you want to stay where you are? First I want to say thank you to Ulbrich. Chris Ulbrich and Ulbrich Stainless Steels has been behind us in everything that we do. They are so supportive not only to us but the entire community, and especially in issues that have to do with legislation and politics. They put their money where their mouth is, and they are behind everything that we do every year. So thank you to that. Let's give them a round of applause. Really been great help in many ways. Whenever I have questions, I call and say, can you give me an answer on this? I also want to bring your attention to the board that's right next to Chris. That's our corporate sponsors and our business partners who stand behind us and support all of the things that we do, including things such as this. Let's see, I want to introduce our panel, one of whom has, oh, there you are. I was going to say left the room. We have Christine Mansfield and Kelly Bertucci, who are our co-chairs of our legislative committee. And we have Betsy Gara and Andy Markowski, who are our lobbyists. And they are going to be our panel this morning, although I think you're doing pictures. They will be asking questions that the candidates have not seen. There will be a definite amount of time that will be given to each answer. You will also have a short rebuttal period. Liz Davis, where did she go? Liz? Liz is our timekeeper, and I also want to thank her because she puts these things together. But she's got the time cards, and she will be pretty strict about that. So without further ado, we are going to get started, and I don't know who's, you're going to, okay. Christine will take it from here. If anybody needs to speak, you need to speak into this or that microphone in order for it to be on the television. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. We want to extend a special thank you to NHTV for taping this morning, of course. We also want to extend a special welcome. I notice we have some local celebrities here in the audience today. First Selectman Mike Frieda, if you can give us a hello. We understand Mayor Bill Dickinson is expected to join us this morning as well, so he's not here yet, but we'll introduce him when he's here.
Perfect timing.
Oh, and indubitable timing, the wonderful Mayor Bill Dickinson of Wallingford. And really, that was unscripted. And I think Chris Ulbrich is here in the audience as well. Chris, would you like to come up here and address the crowd as a sponsor? On behalf of Ulbrich?
That's right.
Come on up. We thank you for your...
Well, just want to say thanks for attending today, and I'm interested in seeing the discussion. And this is an important election. Get out and vote. This very important election. And I was told that you don't change politicians, you change people. You change people when they don't agree with you, or if you don't like the direction that's going. So, or if you like the direction that it's going, you stay where you are, right? But no, so appreciate everybody attending. So enjoy.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Thank you. Just some rules, just the ground rules. Each candidate will be asked to give an opening statement. Given that we have two candidates here today, we'll have a few minutes available for each of them to go ahead and give opening statements. And then we'll go into a question and answer session that our moderators will be asking each candidate a question. They'll be allotted 3 to 5 minutes of answering each question. And again, rebuttals will be accepted. We'll then turn it over to questions and answers from the audience, and we'll be moderating that. Liz will be honoring a time-keeping system. We'd ask that you acknowledge her, and when she is waving that sign that you are out of time, respectfully bring your point to a quick conclusion so that we don't have to pull you off. There is no gong show hook today, but we'd ask that some decorum be kept in terms of keeping this program running forward. Okay, without further ado, we're going to turn the first question over to Betsy Gara. Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you. I thought you were going to do introductory statements.
I'm sorry. Introductions first. Sorry. Go ahead, Senator.
Good morning. I'm Len Fasano, for those who may not know. I want to thank Ulbrich Steel for putting on this event, and the Chamber as well for putting this on, and NHTV. I've been the state senator for 10 years. But more importantly, I, like many of you in this room, own a small business. And I know the challenges that running a small business bring. And until you run a small business, sometimes it's difficult to recognize how tough it is. The days that you worry whether or not you're going to make it through the month or the week or what's coming ahead of you in the future, and the economy plays a big role. So what I think Connecticut needs to do is to be more inclined to help the small businesses, more inclined to reduce the burdens that we have on small businesses, more inclined to look at the tax structure, the regulations, and the restrictions, excuse me, that we have on small businesses. That's what Connecticut needs to do. We need to change our focus. It's our small businesses that grow our economy. It's our small businesses that are our coaches on our Little League teams, our sponsors. We can look at the sponsors here today, but our sponsors of all the Little League teams around the state. It is the heart and soul of many of our communities. And if we lose that, we lose a great part of Connecticut. So I look forward to working with the Chamber and others to sort of change the direction that the state is in right now and creating a vibrant, small business community and help us with this unemployment, because at 9%, the state's in trouble. And it is our small businesses that hire most of the people. And once again, thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. We'd ask former Representative Steve Fontana to give a profile and an opening statement.
Thank you, Christine. I'd like to thank NHTV, Ulbrich Steel, the Chamber, all of you for coming, and all those watching on TV, and my opponent for being here today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Fontana. I'm a former state representative and represented North Haven in the General Assembly for 14 years. And during that time, I chaired the Energy Committee for 4 years and the Insurance Committee for 2. Prior to that, though, I got my first job out of college working for a small business in Bridgeport, actually, doing educational software. After that, I got an MBA degree from Cornell and then spent 4 years working for the company now known as Accenture. So prior to getting elected to the General Assembly in '96, I had the opportunity not only to get an advanced education in business, but to work both for a small business and a very large company. My opponent agrees with me that we need to focus on promoting small business and making the state more small business friendly. I think the difference between us, and there really is a clear choice this election, is how we go about doing it. The policies that he supported and argued in favor of have not worked and will not work. We know what actually promotes small business growth in this state, and that is investing in people and infrastructure, creating demand so that people want products and services, and bottom line, helping to move the state forward by investing in activities that promote sustainable economic growth. Small business is critical to this state's future. Those jobs cannot be moved out of state or overseas. But there's more to it than simply promoting small growth. And his approaches do not respond to the needs of small business. We need to create and stimulate demand. And we can do that, again, by investing in small business and investing in people who would like to pursue small business. And one of the ways we can do that, I think, is try to level the playing field between small businesses and large corporations. If you look at our energy structure and our health insurance structure in particular, large businesses and corporations get to negotiate special deals for themselves, as well as to avail themselves of corporate tax breaks and loopholes that are not available to small business. That puts small business at a distinct disadvantage to both keep and retain qualified help, as well as to grow their business. So I look forward to your questions. I thank you all for coming, and turn it back to you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Now, without further ado, we will resume now our questions and answers. We will turn the mics over to Betsy Guerra from our lobbyist.
Thank you. And to a certain extent, you both answered this question in your opening remarks, but to put a finer point on it, what do you see as the top 2 issues, most important issues that businesses face, and how would you work to resolve them at the state capitol this upcoming session? And we'll start with Senator Fasano.
Well, I think taxes are one of the most important issues facing businesses. We tax at so many different levels. That has led to our unemployment rate. Our unemployment tax is huge because we're broke in our unemployment. We had to borrow from the federal government. And rather than putting money in these first 5 programs, we're removing one business from one part of the state to the other part of the state, which makes no sense. We should be using that money to invest in our education. We should be using that money to invest in our businesses. So number one, we got to change the tax structure the way we have it. It is just impossible for businesses small businesses to survive. I know it because I pay it. Number two, we need to work on our education. We need to pump money, I think, into the tech schools that we have. We have the ability we have the most educated people in the state of Connecticut, kids-wise. We have a high industry of high tech. We need to get into our tech schools so we get new software, new computer systems, new hardware, so we could train the kids when they come out. We went on a jobs tour, and people were talking about how you could get into these high-tech fields and they're close to 6-figure salaries. But the kids aren't trained properly. And one way we can do that, we can increase tax deductions for businesses who donate money, who donate products or their old equipment to the schools. There was some guy at a tour who said, I went and visited the tech school. It'd be about my age. Not that I'm old, but he would be about my age. And he's saying that when I was in tech school, it's the same equipment that's there when I was there. Well, that's not going to do the job. We have to make that commitment to those tech schools. So I think between having a different type of decrease in taxes and also educating our kids, and I got to throw in one more. Small businesses can't get loans. They can't, which means they can't increase in size. They can't proliferate in their communities, because banks won't loan the money. And when you go to a small bank, the biggest complaint I hear from small businesses is, I cannot borrow from my bank. It's impossible. I think the state of Connecticut needs to do that. DEC does a decent job, but I think we should work through our community banks, not through DECD, with all due respect to them. I know I went for an SBA loan through the federal government because of the Hurricane Irene damage. I know what it's like to go through that process. They approved me. It started in September. I got approval in February. I didn't see my first check till August. Well, my business started in May. So I had to carry that until I got some money on the disaster loan. And that is what they call fast track, because it's a disaster loan. Well, that just doesn't work for small businesses. They can't sit there and wait. So those are the issues I would like to see.
Thank you. Representative Fontana?
Thanks, Betsy. Playing off of what I said in my opening statement, I think the two biggest issues are, first, lowering the cost of doing business in the state, and specifically leveling the playing field between small business and large corporations. If you look at, again, this energy cost in particular, but also health insurance cost, it costs small businesses a lot more to compete than it does large corporations. So if we want to promote small business growth in the state, it seems to me we start by trying to level that playing field and bring those costs down. There are ways we can do that, and we can use the ability of the state to pool customers, to negotiate better rates on behalf of customers, as well as to promote energy efficiency and conservation. But bringing the cost of energy down, I think, is the number one thing, because when you listen to businesses that move out of the state to down south or elsewhere, they do it on the basis of energy. When I go door to door and I talk to small business owners throughout the towns of this district, they don't talk to me about taxes. They talk to me about energy and healthcare costs. Those are far larger business costs to them than the taxes are. So I think if we want to do that, we should be focused on bringing down those costs. As health insurance, we can also reduce costs for people. And again, the state has tried to move toward using its buying power and its leverage to try to get better rates for business. And I think that's something that's distinguished my opponent and myself. He doesn't favor doing that. I favor helping businesses get the ability to get lower rates to compete with larger corporations and get a better deal. Second thing, again, is to stimulate demand. Again, tax policy has extreme limits when it comes to getting business going, and we've seen the limits over the last decade and, in fact, the last 30 years. We know how to stimulate business growth, and we do it by stimulating demand, by getting discretionary income back into the hands of people who are prepared to spend it. We also do it by investing. We invest in people's training, and I agree we need to focus on reinvigorating our workforce training, processes and infrastructure, which is why I have a 7-point plan to promote higher education, make higher education more affordable, so we have more people getting the skills and training they need to take the jobs that are out there. But beyond that, we have to, again, focus on investing in infrastructure, putting people back to work when interest rates are at historic lows, by investing in building train stations, schools, roads, bridges, as well as finally focusing on saving people money and promoting sustainable growth. And I think there are things that we can do along those lines, but those would be the top 2 issues, I would say, which is demand, lowering business costs.
Okay. We'll allow a 1-minute rebuttal for each candidate.
Well, there is a difference between Mr. Fontana and myself. And he voted to tax electrical bills to pay for a debt for the state of Connecticut. If electrical issues are the issue, why are we taxing electrical bills? I voted against that proposal because he's right. Energy costs are too high. So I voted against that because that is an issue. And if we're going to tax those bills, we can't say, gee, we're so concerned about energy, but I'm going to vote to tax those bills to pay for the state's inability to cut back on spending. So that's a big issue. And on the health care costs, even Governor Malloy at OPM rejected the notion of pooling using the state insurance to open up to everybody. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, we're self-insured in the state. We don't know who goes in. It may cost taxpayers more because what drives the cost of insurance are the claims that you have. And if you open it up to everybody, you get that. And number 2, if you're selective, everybody who's left out is going to pick up that risk. So if you say, well, you're a dynamite company, I can't let you into the state system, and then you hold all these people that have a greater risk out of the state system, you end up with an unequal balance, because then we all have to pick up, if we're not in the state system, all the businesses that are not have to pick up everybody else's risk, high risk costs. And that's why Governor Malloy said, no, I'm not supporting that bill. Ben Barnes said, we can't afford to do that bill. And that's why it died. Governor Rell vetoed it. It was started to be brought back after Steve was in the legislature. And Governor Malloy said, you know, do what you want, but I'm not doing this. So that's a big difference.
Steve?
There are plenty of ways to help small business get more affordable health care that don't involve the particular proposal that my opponent's talking about. There are ways to pool them and bring them together and get them lower rates. It seems to me we like challenges in the state, and if we're talking about helping business, then we ought to stick to it. It seems to me there are ways to do it, and we should pursue that. The issue he talked about in 2009 had to do with the fact that Governor Rell and my opponent and the Republicans wouldn't cooperate on trying to come up with a solution that would keep us from having to raise taxes or cut investments in things that we need to spend money on. So we had to come up with a plan which actually didn't end up raising people's rates because we didn't need to do it. But we had to come up with a solution that would work. The fact is, there is a difference between us. It's a clear choice. Cutting taxes and cutting spending will not get us out of our recession. Investing and putting money back in people's pockets by saving them money on health insurance and energy will.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to question number 2. Andy Markowski from our lobbyist firm.
Sure. Good morning. State budget situation. It's obviously a prime concern for all of us in the business community. State receipts don't appear to be coming in as strongly as originally anticipated. There's a fear among the business community that they will be relied on once again to make up that deficit through increased taxes in the future, possibly. I think the latest numbers from the Comptroller Office were somewhere around a $27 million deficit in the current year, and that's projected to grow. So I'd like each of you to just comment on that, the state budget deficit in particular. Specifically, if you could touch on your view as to what causes the deficit currently. And then moving forward, if the governor or the legislature proposes new or higher taxes, how would you vote, and which, if any, forms of taxation are acceptable in your mind? And Christine, will we start with Steve for this one?
Yes, we are going to alternate. Go ahead, Steve Fontana.
Okay. First, Andy, you had 3 questions in there,
Sure.
so I really want to make sure I got them properly. So the first question was deficit. Second part of your question.
Well, first is a comment on the deficit,
Right.
and the current situation. Second, what's your view in terms of what causes or caused the deficit?
Right.
And third is taxes in the future. How would you vote, and what, if any, would be acceptable?
Okay. Well, the reason we have deficits, first off, we should keep things in mind that while it's true that the deficit may increase, right now it is currently 0.1%. So it's important to keep that in perspective. And the reason I mention that is because our revenue streams are very volatile. When we shifted, we had a very volatile revenue stream when we only relied on the sales tax because it depended upon the business cycle. So we shifted now to the personal income tax, and we found that that is also volatile to the extent that it's driven in large part by capital gains, driven by the stock market. So we've replaced one highly volatile revenue stream with a revenue stream that is just slightly less volatile. So we had these fluctuations, and of course there were times, as you know, over the past 10 or 15 years, where we projected large deficits and they disappeared because we were in good economic times. So we don't know clearly what's going to happen. So the deficit is driven in large part by the fact that we have a difficult time projecting what our revenues are going to be, but we have a pretty good handle on what our expenses are going to be. So to the extent that we don't manage our revenues better, and we haven't come up with a way to do that, that's what drives the deficit. Now, in terms of taxes, I think the important thing first is to focus on doing everything possible to make our government as lean and efficient as possible. And that means implementing results-based accountability throughout government, not just in select agencies, and having the political will to implement the recommendations when we find programs that don't work. We need to fix them or end them. And I know we started doing that. We need to do a lot more of that. That's how we make our government more efficient, and that's how we can reallocate funds from things that aren't working to things that are. And certainly I would support allocating more money, for instance, to worker retraining and the workforce development. Beyond that, it's clear to me that one of the problems in the state is that middle-class families and small businesses pay a disproportionate share of our tax burden. The wealthy and the largest corporations actually don't pay their fair share. And so I think what we need to do is look at rebalancing the burden so that small businesses and middle-class families do not pay more than their fair share, and those who can afford to pay more do.
Thank you. Senator Fasano?
We have a deficit because we spend too much. That's why we have a deficit. We have a deficit because we can't control our appetite and habit of just spending. That's our problem. Our problem is when everybody was cutting back, including other states, we increased, in the last budget, we increased our spending over $1 billion when we're in a deficit. We raised taxes $2.6 or $2.8 billion over 2 years. Drained every dollar out of the economy, every dollar out of people's pocketbook, and we're shocked that our income isn't the way our revenues to the state have gone down. Well, you can't be shocked. You just drained people's wallets of money. Going from 6.0 to 6.35 is a significant sales tax increase. And Mr. Fontana is correct. The middle class is paying a large share of that. But then why do we go up in a sales tax that hurts everybody, more the middle class than anybody else, and lower income folks than anybody else? Why do we do that? Why are we taxing non-prescription drugs like cough medicine, which apparently I need, aspirin, anything over the counter? We're taxing those for the first time. You have a family and your children get sick, which you send your kids to school, they're going to get sick. That's just the way it is. You got to go and you got to pick up cough. Now you're paying taxes. We never had that before. That takes money out of people's wallet. Clothing under $50. That's going to hurt the middle income people. All those taxes matter, and we siphoned off all that money. And then we look up and we say, gee, our revenues are down. $1.8 billion the first year, and we're $200 million in a hole. 3 months into the second term with another tax increase, and we're $30 million in a hole. I think there's a pattern developing here. We have to watch how we're spending money. That's really the issue. Our budget has gone up 250% since 1991 when the income tax went in. And our population's gone up 3 to 5%. What's going on? What is going on? And when you have a family, it is tough. It is tough. Now, the one thing Representative Fontana and I do agree on, well, result-based accounting. He started it in the House. We talked when he was representative of North Haven and I was state senator. We talked and we said, you know, this is a good thing. Would I help? And we agreed, and we had a lot of conversations. I don't think our colleagues understand how important result-based accounting is, as perhaps Mr. Fontana and I do understand how important it is, because we still see budgets going through that say, okay, they got 5 million, making up numbers, in this budget account, we need to go up 2%, without looking how that 5 million was spent, who did it help, was it worth it? And that's what result-based accounting was supposed to be. But I don't think that that's been followed through with the capital. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But it has not been followed through with the capital. But I think that is a good starting point if we could get other people to join in, and those folks mostly on appropriations do it. It started in a couple of places like DEP, but it's certainly not throughout the whole budget. But our biggest problem is we spend $800,000 on a scoreboard, if you would, in the House this year, so that the light up to see the light to see everybody. Do we really need to do that? I mean, it's not the greatest scoreboard in the world, but it serves its purpose. It's things that's a small number, but it's things like that when you look at it and you say, what are we doing? Why are we not watching our money like we at home watch our money? We just saw the Board of Regents of Education give out an unauthorized salary increases across the board without any oversight and going through any committee. That's what's wrong with government. Spending our money without any accountability. And I hope there will be accountability on this. And that's what's wrong with government. And that's what we got to change. And when Representative Fontana said that, my policies haven't worked, I'm the minority. What policies do I have? I have to go through these guys. Our policies get killed right from the get-go. Government lawyers said, we're not going to talk to you about a budget because we know you guys are on the wrong side of that equation. We're going to push our budget through. And that's why that went through party lines. That's a government. It's one-party rule. That's what's wrong. There was no conversation. My ideas never hit the table. We bring them up. Some that they will say, okay, we're okay with those, we'll go through. But you guys know you're up there. Our policies don't. We're not going to change the world. Minority. He had a supermajority for 2 years when he talked about the tax on the energy bills. He had the supermajority. So if they wanted to do things, they could do things. That's the difference in government. And all it is trying to get some even voice up there. Not that Republicans should be the majority all the time. No. But there should be some even voice, and there's no even voice up there. We get bullied. And that's the truth of the matter. And I run the calendar for the Senate, so I know.
Thank you. We'll allow 1 minute for rebuttal. Mr. Fontana?
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny to hear him sort of recast history. I think the important thing is to remember is, first off, those energy bills did not go up on UI customers or Wallingford public utility customers. So it's kind of funny to talk about, especially when the whole thing got revoked, because we didn't need to do that. But the fact is that what my opponent talks about are policies that don't work fundamentally. We need people talking about policies that do work. The fact is no state and no country has ever cut its way back to prosperity. And the fact is that states that cut more during our recession lost more jobs than states that didn't. The fact is we don't have an appetite for spending. What we have is a healthcare system that we're not controlling. The fact is our costs are driven in large part by Medicaid, which is husky for children and nursing homes for seniors. It's driven by uncompensated care, people who show up at the emergency room and don't have health care. Between the two of them, we spend $7 billion out of our $20 billion budget. So if we want to get a handle on our spending, we need to get a handle on our health care costs. And we don't do that, it seems to me, by cutting spending. We don't get a handle on promoting the kind of policies that you want to see as a business community by cutting spending. What we do is we need to invest and get out of this recession. And cutting spending simply contracts the economy, takes money out of people's hands so they don't spend it, they don't demand your services and goods, and therefore we contract further and further and further. So it's not about an appetite for spending, because I think that the spending that we have is largely fixed. And truthfully, my opponent, unfortunately, has talked about cutting nursing home care, cutting care for children, and voted that way. And I'm not sure that people really want to see that.
Okay. 1 minute rebuttal, Senator Fasano.
Thank you. First of all, the only reason why you weren't taxing your electrical bills is because Sarah Markley, who was in Senator at the time, brought a lawsuit to say it is unconstitutional and wrong delegation of authority for the electric companies to act as tax collectors. And as that lawsuit was making its way, the legislature got together and said, the majority did, and we had some extra money and said, okay, let's just pay this off. But CLMP folks paid, and only UI didn't because it didn't go into effect yet. That date was rolling up. But CLMP folks did pay some of that. They were rebated at the end of the day because that's what the legislature ended up doing. But what it shows is the policy. Whether it went into effect or not, it shows the policy. They're not afraid. My opponent's not afraid to say, if we have a state deficit, we're not going to raise your taxes because we won't look bad. But we'll go put it on an energy bill and let the electrical companies so you can blame them. That's the policy. I don't believe in that policy. If we want to raise taxes, let's just vote up and down on it. That's the issue. And I'm saying sticking on electrical bills is just plainly wrong, especially when you say electrical costs are hurting businesses and electrical costs are hurting the middle class. And electrical costs are the biggest issue since we're the second highest electrical rate folks or cost in the country besides Hawaii, which is some small island in the middle of an ocean. And we have the second highest rate. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. And the policies of cutting to grow do work. Why hasn't it? Because they haven't shown it in Connecticut. If I can, a number of years ago, when we did cut taxes, and there was a debate between Mr. Fontana and Mr. Wilson in the back, Steve was proud to say, we cut taxes on businesses, we're growing the economy. That's what he said during that debate. I don't know, Mr. Wilson was talking about how businesses are bad. He said, well, we cut taxes here, we cut taxes there. That was a good thing. And he's right, it was a good thing. We need that back. We need to bring that back to the state if we're going to grow the state and bring promise. Because I want my kids to stay here. I want my kids to work here. I want my kids to live here.
Thank you. We'll move on to the third question. Again, Kelly Batucci from AT&T, one of our co-chairs for the Legislative Committee.
Good morning. Both of you have acknowledged that the cost of energy is probably one of the most pressing issues facing the business community. Can you provide 2 to 3 specific policies that you would like to see implemented to help reduce those costs?
And we're going to start with Senator Fasano. We were alternating starting questions.
Well, one, I think getting some special tax ability for folks to generate energy on site. I know Masonic Care was trying to go on site to get off the grid. I know that my project in East Haven, I looked at fuel cells, and what happened was to buy the fuel cell generator thing was, because I have a natural gas line running through my property, was $1.5 million just to buy it, didn't include installation. Well, that makes it unaffordable because I just don't have that big a business. But what I'm seeing, and I will tell you that I've been involved with Commissioner Esty in the past 3 or 4 months. In fact, I think you may recall a couple weeks ago he talked about an energy policy, and I was with my daughter in South Carolina at her college. But they talked about an energy policy that I met with Commissioner Esty about, which was to promote infrastructure on natural gas because it is the lowest cost rate. And I think you need to combine that with fuel cells and give tax credits because businesses who are small businesses can't afford these machines unless there's some help from the state government. So I think we need to look at that. I think fuel cell technology on top of natural gas is something that is a promising future for the state of Connecticut. I think we need to do the microgrids that have been talked about. I think that's also another promising issue. You know, solar and wind are out there. What was unbelievable is that we talked about wind turbines, and there was this person who sat on the Energy Committee who was all in favor of renewables, but when the wind turbines went in her neighborhood, she passed a bill to put a moratorium on all wind turbines, which the hypocrisy there was unbelievable. But the point of it is we do have to maybe even put some credits into renewable energy technology to get people to work on that type of issue. But solar is just too expensive to put in. I looked at it as well, because where I am, I get sun all day coming across. It's just too expensive to get the solar panels and put them on. You just don't get the return on your investment in many, many manners. But I think we need to look at some ability to get the natural gas going, as Commissioner Esty talked about, changing new generation, in fuel cell technology. We need to get businesses to invest in that by giving them some sort of credits to do that, so we could get them going, just to get it initially started and people could see the benefits. And I think we need to help, because we've got the state with the smartest people and high technical machinery to advances, to look at different technologies to improve that. There was a theory out there that Commissioner Esty kind of believes in, which is called a harm charge, to charge people extra if they use fossil fuels and stuff. I don't believe that's the way to go. I don't like the hammer approach. I like the carrot approach.
Thank you. Representative Fasano.
Thanks. As the former chair of the Energy Committee, I have a few ideas on this, so I'll shoehorn them into my time. The first thing is that there's a limit to what tax credits can do. I mean, there are some people who talk about tax credits like they're the be-all and end-all of state policy. The fact is, my opponent and I were at a business forum in Durham last week, and a gentleman got up, a conservative Republican, and said, look, just so you guys are clear, tax credits don't move people to do things. Demand moves people to do things. And by the way, if you give them a tax credit, you're just giving them money for things they do anyway. So the fact is, tax credits don't move the needle. And in fact, we did tax credits in 2005 and 2007 when I was chair of the Energy Committee. And so we've had a number of years where we've seen, in fact, you don't get people to move to fuel cells or solar or whatever simply by tax credits. Well, so what can you do? Well, first is we have a procurement manager at the state level now. And the procurement manager we can empower to negotiate rates on behalf of all Connecticut consumers. Currently, you have UI and CLMP and municipal utilities going out on their own, in their own ways, and they're not doing it in as coordinated a fashion to get us the lowest potential rates. Wallingford Public Utility deserves great credit. They are flexible, they are nimble. They go out in the market when it makes sense, for what it makes sense, for as long as it makes sense. And I think we need to bring that same level of flexibility, frankly, to UI and CLMP, on top of having, again, that state procurement manager go out and negotiate statewide purchasing for all of us. The biggest thing, though, I think that we can do, frankly, is to get our utilities back in the business of competitively generating electricity. This was the big mistake that we made in 1998. Not that we deregulated, although that was a mistake, but the biggest mistake was not allowing our utilities to continue to own and operate and generate electricity. Why? Because our private utilities, privately owned utilities, but regulated, generate electricity at a regulated profit. So they don't make the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% profit that the people who bought our plants make. They are required to make no more than 9 3/4%, and sometimes far less. So if we want to bring down basic electricity rates, if we put them back in the business of competing to generate electricity, that will bring the private sector actors down to their level. It will squeeze the excess profits out of their rates and bring down rates for everyone. Finally, as far as other policies, conservation and efficiency are key. And in fact, I was proud during my time as chairman of the Energy Committee to make us a national leader in energy efficiency. And I'm pleased to see that Governor Malloy and Commissioner Esty are committed to following in those footsteps and pursuing that even further. But there are things that we can do. Solar thermal, for instance, which heats hot water, is actually a much more cost-effective and cheaper way to promote solar energy for residential homeowners in particular, but even for businesses. Because it's a lot cheaper and more cost-effective than photovoltaic or electric generation of solar energy. So there are a number of things that we can do and should do, but overall it's bringing down the rates for everybody by using our purchasing power and getting our utilities back in the business of competitively generating electricity.
Thank you. We'll allow 1 minute for rebuttal. Senator Fasano.
Procurement is sort of happening in the private industry anyway. Folks are going out there. We've all received our sort of notices in the mail, and what they do is they buy from UI or CLMP in large bulk, and they sell it to you at a lower rate because they're able to negotiate a lower rate by buying so much energy from UI. So that's sort of happening on a private scale. Unfortunately, a lot of the energy deals with the fact of the way the grid is set up, and we're subject to some of the federal rules and regulations for which we can't do much about unless Congress gets involved. But I will also say that as far as the cost of energy, when Steve was chairman of energy, we had the highest electrical rates in the nation. And when Steve voted for deregulation, that was a mistake. And I'm not blaming the folks who voted for it, to be honest with you, because it was a choice. And you get a lot of different information, and people tell you a lot of different things. And I wasn't there, so I'm not going to second guess anybody's vote because I was not there to hear the arguments or look at the information. But that was a misstep. And I think we all recognize that as a misstep. The question is, you can't get the ink back out of the milk, as they say, because that's where we are. So we have to look at other ways of doing this. I also want to say, when we had this energy problem, when Steve was chairman of energy, the first year, an energy bill never got out of that committee because they couldn't agree on what they were going to do. And the second year, the energy bill that came out, Steve voted against. When he was chairman of energy, Steve voted against that, and Steve brought his own bill up, and that didn't go any many places. It is a tough issue. It is a tough issue, and we can't necessarily solve it just on the state issue. What we're looking to do with natural gas and other things certainly is a small step to getting there. Finding the natural gas reserves nationwide has been a huge help in driving the prices down. But I think the issue is the grid, and the issue is getting our folks in Congress to come to the table and help us, because it's beyond many of the things that we can do with all the different rules and regulations, as I understand it.
Thank you. Mr. Fontana, 1 minute for rebuttal.
Okay, just to correct the record, the first thing is the reason that we did deregulation in the first place was for two reasons. We had the highest rates in the country then, and the business community came to us in the legislature and said, you have to do something to cut our rates. And so people like the CBIA, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, and the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce testified up at the Capitol and said, please deregulate because it will lower our rates. And it did temporarily. So we did it for that reason. As far as the 2005 bill, he's just wrong. The bill died during the regular session. We brought it back 3 weeks later, and we passed it. He was one of 7 people who voted against it for some reason, which I don't understand, because it was full of private sector incentives, including a lot of the tax credits that he talks about favoring, that would actually get us out of a threatened $2 billion hole the federal government was going to put us in. So I really don't know why he voted against it, given that the Republican chair of the Public Utility Control Association recommended voting for it, and the governor signed it into law, but nevertheless he chose to vote no. But in 2007, when actually I was trying to lower rates, he actually voted with me. I voted against the bill in the House. He was one of 3 who voted against it in the Senate. So when he came down to the House and said to me, why did you vote no? How do you think I should vote? I said to him, do what you think is right. And he said, well, no, tell me more about it. And I said, look, the bill's not going to lower rates, and if you think it's going to lower rates, you're kidding yourself. And so he, to his credit, was one of 3 people up in the Senate who voted no as well. So, you know, he's recognized my knowledge and my expertise when it comes to energy. And although he didn't follow my lead in 2005, which I don't understand, in 2007 he did the right thing.
All right. Thank you. We're going to move on to question number 4. And we're going to move to Betsy Guerra, one of our legislative lobbyists.
Thank you.
And we're going to start, we're going to start with Mr. Fontana.
Okay, thank you. Last session, the legislature adopted a bipartisan jobs package that included programs to help restart our economy by providing credits, grants, and loans to companies for job retention and expansion. In addition, prior to that, Governor Malloy had initiated the first 5 economic development program. Are these programs successful in restarting or jump-starting our economy, and how do we make sure that these programs are really directing funds toward industry sectors such as manufacturing and small businesses that are critical to our economic growth?
First question is, part of your question is, are they working? I think it's too soon to tell in some respects. Certainly there's been a lot of attention paid to the first 5, and as Senator Fasano knows, we have a company coming to Connecticut, coming to North Haven, actually, the old Quebecois facility on State Street, as a result of the first 5. It's a joint venture between an Arizona company and an Australian company, going to bring hundreds of jobs to Connecticut in our area over the next couple of years. So it's going to have to be a wait-and-see approach as to whether that works or not. As far as the tax credits in the bill, I'm less than optimistic. I mean, again, when a small business owner in Durham gets up, conservative Republican, and says these aren't working, they're not going to work, and you're wasting our money, you have to take notice of that opinion. Certainly the investments that were in the jobs bill I think can and will work. Certainly getting people trained better and getting capital, as you said, capital to small businesses, entrepreneurs, sole proprietors, that's the way to go. And so I think there's more of that we can do, and that's why I would favor making sure that in the business tax exemption task force work that's going on right now, we evaluate all of the corporate tax breaks and loopholes that are out there, because it adds up to billions of dollars. And frankly, we need to reallocate that and shift those resources from corporations down to the smaller businesses and companies. So I think it's a mixed bag, frankly. I think we need to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck, and I'm hopeful that we will, over the long term, do that. And certainly, over the last several years, we've tried different approaches to promote small business growth and economic activity in Connecticut. So I think the legislature on both sides deserves credit for trying to put together a good plan. And I think, again, there are a lot of good things that were done. And certainly I'd like to work to help build on those things that were good and will be strengths in the bills going forward.
Thank you. Senator Fasano?
To Governor Malloy's credit, unlike the budget where he said, hey, we'll take care of it, you guys have a seat on the Republican side, on the jobs package, he brought the leaders into the room, and being a leader, I was in the room, and he said, look, I want to put together a jobs package, I want to put together ideas, but this is how we're going to do it. Everybody, Democratic House, Republican House, Senate, Democrat, Republican, you're all going to write ideas, you're all going to submit them, then we're going to put them all in like a book, a notebook. Then we're all going to come back in, and we're all going to talk about the ideas. The highly objectionable ones on one side or the other will be tossed out. Then we're going to boil it down. Then we're going to work with those ideas that we have common ground on, and then that's how we're going to proceed. And that's exactly what happened. And there are folks who said we should have gone further, and there's folks who said we went too far on some issues. But I will tell you, in that room, it was agreed if this job package went to the House and the Senate, that neither the Democrats or Republicans would stand up and sort of say it didn't go far enough or it went too far. Otherwise, we would hurt the very prospect we were trying to achieve. And that went well. And that was our deal, and that's how it went through, and that's how government should work, getting folks together and working towards a common end. And I applaud the governor for doing that. On the, has it or will it help? I agree that it's too early to tell. I think one of the probably weakest components of that jobs bill is a lot of people don't know about it. I think a lot of small businesses have no idea that it's out there and how to apply. That's number one. And the second issue is the applications are backlogged, unbelievably backlogged. And the third one is the reason why they're backlogged is OPM, the governor's money end of it, has not fully funded the jobs package. So although we have these good ideas, we do not have the money like the manufacturing part about it. The money is not all in place that if every application went through, we'd have enough money to do that. So I think that needs to be worked on. But philosophically, I think that's the right move. The first 5 program, I have a few complaints. I think Mr. Fontana is right. Quebecor is probably an outstanding move. A company not even in the United States from Australia moves to Connecticut, picks North Haven, goes into an existing facility and brings all these jobs. Great move, good investment. NBC Sports in Stamford, great move, good investment. Hedge fund to move from Westport to Stamford. The guy makes $3.9 billion a year. Billion, the CEO? And we gave him $115 million. That's a rounding error on his tax returns. And we gave him $115 million to move from Westport to Stamford. That's a bad move. Cigna, I don't know anybody who's bleeding for Cigna Insurance Company. We gave them money to stay in Connecticut. Moving a company from Cheshire, the pharmaceutical company from Cheshire to New Haven, Cheshire's without a business. Those are moves I have to question. I'd rather have that money, in my view, first 5 should be for literally companies that are not in Connecticut, moving to Connecticut, and we get them started here in Connecticut. I'd like to take a lot of that money, put it in a small business loan. Let the community banks, not the larger banks, the small community banks that know our district, that know our towns, that know our people, that generally everybody in that bank lives in town, and let them loan money to our small businesses at a very small interest rate. Let the community bank keep the interest rate, return the principal back to the state as it's being paid down, let it be run by these small community banks so that our small businesses can get the loans. And it's done by people who understand I'm not just pushing paperwork. And I say that because I do DECD loans in the office, and I do, my partner does, an SBA loans. And the amount of paperwork that you have to go through, and the amount of attorney's fees, and accounting fees, which is really, I'm telling you, paperwork that no one really looks at. I mean, tax returns are important, I get that. But you don't need to do a balance sheet if you have a tax return. You know what's going on with that business. But you have to go through it because there's a checklist that you just have to do. Get community banks involved, let them go through it. They know how to make the loans, like smaller banks. So that's what I would do. But I think the first 5 does have a purpose. But I don't think the purpose is, we're so desperate to say we're doing something for businesses. We're moving from this side of the Titanic to the other side of the Titanic and saying we're saving the ship. It just doesn't do it, in my view.
Thank you. We'll allow 1 minute for rebuttals. Mr. Fontana.
There's a couple of points. First is, I think if there's a fault to the first 5, it's the focus on these very large corporations. And again, I think the reallocation of resources needs to be to smaller companies. If we were spending the kind of money on small businesses in Connecticut as we are on the first 5, I think we'd be seeing a much different economic profile out there right now. And I had the opportunity actually to see a small business on Defco Park Road here on the North Haven-Wallingford line. And what they were saying was their number one problem, finding qualified people to take the jobs they have. And it seems to me we would do better to focus on the needs of companies like that up front and put the resources into the CEDF or DECD or the workforce development boards or wherever to get the little things right before we start going after big corporations. The other point I would finally make is that a lot of these ideas need to be fleshed out further, and they can be fleshed out. And some people may know that I've been developing over the course of several weeks my plan for what I'll do if I'm elected. So if people want to go to www.stevefontana.com, every week I put up a different element of my plan. And so between now and Election Day, we'll have up the plan of what I propose to do to continue to promote small business growth and rein in the energy and healthcare costs.
Thank you. 1 minute, Senator Fasano.
Just 2 quick things. When Mr. Fontana talked about big company, Jackson Lab was another one where we spent $300 million for only 290 jobs. I thought it was 300 jobs, but apparently 10 jobs that UConn is creating is going to count towards, that we're paying for as taxpayers out of our pocket, is going to count towards their 300 quota. I don't even understand that arithmetic, but that was, first the governor said yes, then the governor said no, then the governor said yes. So they only have to do 290 jobs. But I agree that, even some of the money should go into our tech schools to get our tech school people on board. That's where this money should be spent better, I think, to improve our economy and our educational system, so we do have a workforce that's talented. But we shouldn't grow government with this money. We shouldn't grow government with this money, and there's a tendency to do that, and I don't think that that's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We're going to have the 5th question. Andy Markowski from Gavin Markowski, please. And we will start with Senator Fasano.
Great. I want to turn to transportation policy for a minute. Transportation obviously impacts the business community in terms of receiving materials and goods, as well as their customers and employees, being transported to a place of business or out in the field doing sales. You've both mentioned investing in infrastructure. There seems to be 2 schools of thought when it comes to transportation investment. One is focusing on the mass transit or public transit side. Recently, there have been a lot of discussions about state investment in the New Haven to Springfield rail line or the Hartford to New Britain busway. And the other school of thought is highways, roads, and bridges, sort of the traditional transportation infrastructure. And some in the business community say that those projects, highways, roads, and bridges, are not being funded or maintained, sometimes at the expense of the mass transit projects. So just wanted to hear your take on transportation policy and where you think the focus should be.
I think there's multiple focuses. I just heard this morning that now they've gone back and they're in the fall season having more trains leaving New Haven Station going to New York. because I guess I switch over around the fall time when it's busier. See, to me, and I always tell the story, my wife's from Long Island, so for her to get on a train is no big deal. For me, it's a major event. It's like getting on an airplane to me. Because in Connecticut, we are a car state, like it or not. That's just what we are. And we're not used to getting on trains and moving along. We're used to just getting our car and going to the place we have to go in. It's a bad habit, but that's the habit that we have. And I think one way we break down that habit is more of a marketing campaign. Many of you may recall in the room the old from New York, take the train to the plane years ago, sort of catchy slogan. But we should look and focus on trying to market our train system better. I believe in the New Haven rail system going through North Haven and Wallingford and making its way up to the Hartford area. I think that's good. I know we have a train that comes by, but it doesn't work because you got to get it like at 9 o'clock in Wallingford, and that just doesn't get you to work on time. And then coming back, either you got to leave work at 4 or you got to leave work at like 7 or 8 o'clock, and that kind of doesn't work. So I look forward. I think that could be a good line. Hopefully we can get the money for North Haven to have its train station, but I think that could be a good line. I know recently Wallingford approved their location and they have that money in set. So I think that could be a good way of going. And I think we need to look at the train issue and keep that on board. As far as the busway from New Britain to Hartford, I think that's a colossal waste of money. I think that that was done for a variety of reasons. I would suggest none of which is strictly related to improving the mass transportation system here in Connecticut. Some argue, well, we have to maximize federal dollars. Well, that's like saying, you know, you have a buy one shirt, get one free. Well, because I want to get the free one, I'm going to take the money out of my wallet to go buy the one to get the free one. That doesn't, we can use that $250 million many places other than putting it in a $650 million project that's going to cost us, I think it's $80 million a year to run for the rest of our lifetime that we're going to be paying. So I don't think that gets us in the right place. I think we have to face reality that we do use our highways. We have to face reality that we do need to keep our infrastructure up. And, you know, doing things like the Pearl Harbor Bridge, the Quinnipiac Bridge, and that project has been a seamless, in my view, and I drive over a lot, a seamless project. It's gone up on time, on budget, with very little impact to the area, and I think that's been a good thing. I don't think you'd say, well, we're not going to do our highways, we're going to do mass transportation, or we're not going to do mass transportation, we're going to do our highways. I don't think you could separate it that closely. I think there are people who will do both. But I think we have to do better in getting the message out on the train system. I just think we have to break the habit that I think most Connecticut people have, which is to get in a car and drive.
Thank you. Mr. Fontana.
First thing, I don't think that we've been investing in mass transit at the expense of roads and bridges. There's a reason why the nickname for the DOT was Department of TAR, and it wasn't because we were spending too much on mass transit in the state. And in fact, I think if you think about where we're as a state, we are hard-pressed to identify massive new investments of money in mass transit. We have done good things on the New Haven to New York line, the New Haven line on commuter rail. Of course, we've done some Shoreline East periodically, built new train stations. But in terms of overall expenditures, we still spend the vastest proportionate amount of our money on roads and bridges, and I think we're going to continue to do that. I think the issue is, what kind of choices and options are we giving people, especially as we go forward? What we've seen is a fundamental paradigm shift in the cost of oil, which of course drives the cost of gasoline, and the projections are it's going to go up steeply from here. And so rather than simply marketing to people and telling them what is out there, I think we need to build an infrastructure that they can use and feel comfortable with. And what people in other states like Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Maryland, elsewhere, what they want is convenience, and they want to know that they have reliable infrastructure. So it's convenience and reliability. So how do you do that? Well, you build a network over time. So I think that the New Haven to Springfield commuter rail is an excellent idea. I was on board with it from the first day I got up to the General Assembly in '97. I was very pleased when we finally have been pushing forward to get money there. And I think that that will help to drive economic development in the state for two reasons. First, you not only create lots of immediate construction jobs, but if you go to other states where they have subway stops, train stations, or whatever, whether it's Atlanta, Boston, or anywhere in between, you find that train stations or commuter rail stations are economic hubs of activity in and of themselves. And so if we want to help drive that kind of economic activity and growth, it makes sense to make the investment and do that. I agree with my opponent. I think that the busway wasn't the right move. I'm in favor more of a rail system. So New Haven, Springfield, big part of that. I'd love to see something going from Hartford down to Waterbury through Danbury, and ultimately something along the eastern part of the state, from New London or Groton or Norwich out that way, creating a network so that, heaven forbid, gasoline ever gets to $5 or $6, $7 a gallon, and I'm afraid that it will in the next 5, 10 years, we've got a network that people can go to of train stations and convenient schedules and reliable operation. So I think that transportation is a necessary investment, and I think that's what we've seen distinguish us from other countries for the last 40, 50, 60, 70 years, was we had the world's premier infrastructure. And what you see going on in some other countries is that they have now lapped us to some degree by making investments, whether it's in high-speed rail or commuter rail or what have you. And I think providing options to people is the way to go, and building the network in advance of their coming is the key, because as we've seen with Shoreline East, if we build it, they will come.
Thank you. 1 minute rebuttal, Senator Fasano.
No, there's anything, but I think we're kind of on the same page on those issues.
Any closing comments?
I'll yield back my rebuttal time, too. I don't have anything to
Very good.
rebut.
I think it opens up a generous allotment for questions and answers from the audience. At this point, we will turn the program over for questions and answers. There is a mic that we will be floating backwards. We would ask that you use the mic so that our good friends at NHTV can capture your comments for the television audience. We will ask that you phrase your question, minimize the rhetoric, ask rather than dictate, if you could, for the benefit of the candidates so we can really hear their answers on this. And please, respect and decorum is asked with every question. We'll open up the floor to Mr.
Thank you.
Ulbrich.
Chris Ulbrich here. A couple of comments. We produce $100 million of solar wire, just on both your comments. Solar has come down tremendously in the last 6 months, last year. So, matter of fact, solar is cheaper in Connecticut at about 19 cents kilowatt. So it's really come down. Another comment, we were looking at a $7.5 million fuel cell, but there's a sales tax on it, 6.5% sales tax, and that killed the deal. We're not going to pay the state of Connecticut a $500,000 sales tax. So that's something to consider, because the fuel cell companies are Connecticut based. So why do people have to pay a sales tax to use a fuel cell in Connecticut to pay a Connecticut-based sales tax, you know? So, but my question is, obviously the state legislature is union-focused, way union-focused. So how will the two of you bring, you know, and they're anti-business with captive audience, it just goes on and on, medical mandates, how would the two of you bring that back a little bit? What, you know, how can you bring this, you know, some pro-business into the state legislature, if that's even possible?
I'm going to ask for 1 minute responses from each candidate. Is there one in particular you'd like to start with, Chris?
No.
Okay. Gentlemen, I'll do a coin toss. Okay.
I'll start.
Mr.
Rock,
Fontana.
paper, scissors.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say, Mr. Ulbrich, I have to disagree with your premise. It's not union-focused. Like I said, we talked about how I voted for massive tax cuts for business in the late 90s, a couple $1 billion. I don't think that would have happened if we were union-focused. Captive audience hasn't passed. Although it's come up repeatedly, not union-focused. So I think actually we've done a lot to address business, and I can tell you that in my capacity as a chair of committees for 6 years, I did things that business wanted to see accomplished. So I would disagree with your premise. But having said that, what we try to do is balance things. And so what we're trying to do is trying to find win-win. And I noticed, for instance, Ms. Bertucci is with AT&T, so if she'll allow me, I'll just use my minute to just refer to her. In 2007, AT&T came to us and said, you know, we can create a lot of jobs here in Connecticut if you crack the cable TV monopoly and allow us to come in to compete for people's video business. And I said, you know what, this is a possibility here. Now, if we were union-focused, we might have said, no, we're not doing it. We like what we got now. But the thing is, we said, you know what, this is a possible win-win here. We can create jobs, stimulate economic activity, welcome a large corporate partner here in Connecticut to grow their business. And so I think this is something that we found as a win-win. Has it worked perfectly? No, I don't think it's worked perfectly. But I think overall, it's been a positive growth. And I think consumers that I talked to said, we want choice, we want competition, we want quality, we want options. And so it was a way of working together in what I think was a win-win.
Thank you. Senator Fasano, 1 minute.
I think there's a union slant in the Capitol, and I don't think there's, in my view, any question about it. Probably more so when Chris Donovan was Speaker of the House, and I don't know how it will go forward, but certainly more so when Chris was Speaker of the House. And I think what happened there was he would leverage that power in the House to get what he wanted in the Senate, because he knew he can get anything passed in the House with their numbers. They just get up there and say, we want it, the majority go through, and that was the end of discussion. In the Senate, they had a little more difficult time because there were a lot of moderate Democrats who would come over with us and perhaps block things that we view weren't fair to the non-union folks. That being said, one of the ways you get around this is by having more dialogue and more conversation, and number two, evening out the numbers in the House and the Senate, and in particular in the Senate. When I was up there, it was 17-19. Now we're not at 17-19, we're 14-22. So when I was up there, 17-19, conversations took place. After that, as our numbers went down, very little conversation. Majority said, we're going to do it, get out of our way. If you're going to talk, that's fine, we'll vote, you lose. So I think keeping the numbers closer, Republican and Democrat, and not necessarily have Republicans majority, but closer is fine.
Thank you very much. Questions from the audience? We'd ask you to approach the front, please. The brave.
We covered everything.
Yeah, maybe.
Mayor Dickinson, again, if you can take the mic, we'd appreciate that.
One of the things I think we all face is programs that will cost us more money. And I'm going to reference the phosphorus program that Department of Energy and Environmental Protection is talking about imposing on a number of communities. I think there's some 40 that are on rivers that are impacted by phosphorus. It's not a public health issue. So for Wallingford, that will cost close to $20 million with little or no financial help from state or federal government. So my question is, why don't we suspend programs like that that are not absolutely essential until such time as the economy's better and there's more money available? Is that a possibility? Suspension of a program until such time?
I forgot who went first last time.
I went first last time.
We'll let Senator Fasano go first for this one.
Mayor Dickinson, you and I have talked about this issue at great lengths. And in fact, as you know, the bill that was presented in front of Planning and Development said that DEP would have a right to dictate to places like Meriden, Cheshire, Danbury, Wallingford, and New Haven that they're going to come up with what that percentage is of phosphorus, and you're just going to follow it. In fact, Meriden got hurt because they came out with a level, and they met that level, and DEP said, oh, you know what, now you spent all that money reaching that level. We really meant it should be lower, so now you got to redo everything, which is just crazy. And we changed that bill to say everyone gets together. And I will tell you, just the other day, I got an email saying that they're going to have a meeting on November 5th to talk about this issue, which means legislators who have been involved in this no longer can't even go, because if they're in the middle of election, they can't take a whole day to be at the Capitol 2 days before an election, day before the election, and sit there and say, we got to talk about this phosphorus thing. So they're going to give us another date for legislators after the fact. But what's important about this, if it is important, and the state of Connecticut feels it's important, then we should fund it. We should give the $20 million to the town of Wallingford and say, we believe this is an important policy that you must follow. Here's the money to follow it. It's wrong for us to say, we believe it's an important policy, go find the money, Mayor. You go raise your taxes. You go cut other places to fund this. That's wrong. And I agree with you. We should hold back. We should wait. But we should also say, if we're going to set a low level from EPA, then through EPA, then we should fund it. It should not be the burden of Wallingford residents.
Thank you. Mr. Fontana?
Yeah, I think, first off, Mayor, we have in the past indicated that we're willing to suspend or postpone things that are a burden to towns. There have been issues of in-school suspension, there have been issues of school indoor air quality, there have been other issues where we have said as a legislature, you know what, we're going to delay implementation in order to help towns make the the switch over. Having said that, as you know, one of your state representatives in Wallingford, Mary Mashinsky, was involved in that legislation. And so if something happened that you had a disagreement with, clearly the legislature decided to pass this because they felt there was a reason for it. So whether it's impacting Wallingford per se or Long Island Sound, clearly there's a problem with excess phosphorus in the water system. Now, we have in the past come up with ways to address things and help towns do it, and I believe several years ago there was another element in our sanitary water supply that we provided grants and low interest loans to the North Haven Water Pollution Control Facility, for instance, to do that. So there are ways that we can do it to help towns do it, and I think that's appropriate. I think it's appropriate for the state to say, here's how we can help you do things that we'd ask you to do. So, but typically that's something that gets worked on over time, and we can do it.
Thank you. Okay. Looking for another question from the audience? Going once? Oh, Mayor Bell, back again. We'll allow this once, Mr. Mayor Bell.
I'll have to ask another one, and it really deals with the cost, especially at the local level, of providing the services. And we all know we have collective bargaining, and I think it's an effective way of ironing out differences between management and labor in order to avoid strikes. I don't have any problem with that. But my question is, how is it in these economic times we have a system with arbitration that gives us 2 and 3% increases per year in salaries and benefits, when clearly that's way beyond what I think the economy can sustain? So what kind of reform could we expect with regard to that issue? Arbitration awards seem to be well out of the league of what the economy supports.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Fontana, you're up.
Well, you know, and again, Mayor, I appreciate that this has been a drum that you've beat repeatedly, you know, because you're very upset about collective bargaining. You know, I think that collective bargaining is a process we set up. And it's important to remember that collective bargaining came about and because we didn't want to have public strikes. And so we created a process because we didn't want to see what happened in Chicago this past couple of months, or what used to happen in Rhode Island before every school year, where we'd have public sector workers going on strike because we couldn't have a process to work out a fair system for addressing contractual issues. So there needs to be a balance, and my understanding the last time the legislature looked at it was that 90% of the issues that were worked out in collective bargaining were worked out to the satisfaction of both the towns and their collective bargaining units. And the 10% that went to binding arbitration, half the time it went in favor of the town, half the time it went in favor of the collective bargaining unit. So it wasn't a system that was inherently biased in favor of one side or the other. I think clearly we have to balance things out, and I think that's what goes on. But I know in North Haven, the first selectman who's here is in the process of dealing with his units. He's reached agreements with some units very readily. Others he's still working on it with. But to my knowledge, he hasn't come out repeatedly and slammed the process or slammed these workers, because he understands that they're residents of the community to a large degree. They're middle-class people. They help make the community what it is, and that demonizing them and attacking them and trying to squeeze every last dollar out of them isn't a system that's going to make his community a vibrant, prosperous one.
Senator Fasano.
Mayor, I know you're not saying that the unfairness of the employees to say, hey, I deserve more, the union to argue for more, that's just part of their job and what they're supposed to do, so I appreciate that. I think some of the arbitration issues have to look at, I think they get to look at the healthiness of the town. And when you have a mayor who's done as good a job as you have, and Mr. Frieda has done in our towns, sometimes that comes back to haunt you, because you get to look on the healthy contingency fund and the money you put aside for emergencies. They get to look at some of that money, not all, but some of that money, to determine if you can afford to pay the employee more. And I think that there should be something to talk about throwing in what's happening in the private sector just as a balance. Because what has to happen is that if you have to go up on taxes, it is the middle class, the middle income people, who face the brunt of that of that cost increase. You're not going to take it out of your contingency fund or the money you put aside, because you guys put that aside because that is what you're supposed to do as CEOs of a major company, is you put inside. So if you get hit with something huge, you could grab that money without having to go to taxpayers and do a special assessment charge. I get that. So that's where I think we need to work on. Healthier towns should not be punished because the CEO has managed their town correctly, has slimmed their costs, have a great town that they're working in with a low tax rate. That should not equate to, well, you need to give a 3, 4, or 5% increase to all employees. So I think the criteria that's looked at in the arbitration process should be reviewed. But I know you're not demonizing anybody, but I think the criteria should be looked at to sort of put a different perspective on it.
Thank you. Any other questions? We'd ask you to use the mic, if we can. One, two.
Good morning, Ron Hansen. Gentlemen, in brief, both of you have indicated an understanding of small business and the needs and issues pertaining to sustaining their continued growth here in Connecticut. What historical background do either of you have to offer to the voters that type of understanding of the business owners are truly going through today? What historical background do either of you have to offer the voters in that type of understanding of what we're going through today?
He hasn't indicated either one, so Senator Fasano, if you want to take that first.
Sure. Ron, thanks for the question. As I said, I run a small business. When my dad passed, I had to pick up his small businesses that he's running. So I understand what it is for businesses to pay rents, for businesses to survive in negotiating leases. I understand what income they have and how the economy has hurt their ability to continue on with an existing lease. As a business owner, I understand when you're having an unemployment tax that is your experience rate plus the rate to pay back the federal government, so therefore you're paying $40 more per employee just to have them on the books. That's just the extra part. I understand that as a business owner. I understand when someone calls up and says, hey, I can't afford to do this year because I don't have the money to do it. I save for it, but I got to use my savings. So I understand how the businesses are hurt by an economy that is causing people to hold back. I also understand Connecticut is a business-unfriendly climate, period. I think you were at the rally 2009. I know Mr. Ulbrich was at the rally 2009. Just as the economy was fading off, and we stood there in the cold with Robin in the chamber saying, don't raise taxes, don't hurt us, because this economy is going off the cliff. And people said, wait, it's going to get better. 3 years later, it hasn't gotten any better, and it's gotten worse. We have not created a net new job in Connecticut, net new jobs since 1990. There were more jobs in 1990 than there are today in Connecticut. That's a bunch of administrations, it's not just one. But it is a philosophy, if I would, that the majority has put out there over the 25 years. And it's those policies. And we have to change that. We have to change. So I feel it every day. I'm worried about my membership for next year already. When we got hit by the storm, I lost a lot of people who thought I never was going to reopen. I was going to collect the insurance and go home. I didn't, because that property meant a lot to my dad, and that property meant a lot to me. So I reinvested in there. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'll find out, let you know a year from now. But I know what it was to rebuild that business, and I know what it is, my law business, to run. People don't hire lawyers right now. People are holding back. Litigation's not worth it. So you've got, and that goes to paying your employees. So I get it every single day. I'm facing those issues at different levels because of what I do. So I understand what's happening in this economy. I understand how fragile. But more importantly, I got to tell you, in my belief, if we don't come out of this in 6 more months, not only nationally but here in the state, we're in serious trouble. We're going to run out of money in December out of our pocketbook to pay the state bills. We're going to borrow short term in December because our revenues are off. You look at our cash pool. From last year to this year, our cash pool is down $5 $100,000, our cash pool from last year, which means we don't have enough money. That's why daycares are not getting their money, because the state's holding back giving money to daycares. They're running 45 days in arrears. Can you imagine if you had to cover your payroll for 45 days? Because we pay for parents who are working and send their kids. We offset that as we should, but we're not paying these daycare centers for 45 days. A woman in East Haven said I had to close. Saturday, a woman in Wallingford told me, you know, you work for that woman in East Haven. I'm behind 60 days, Len. I can't afford it. I got 2 daycares. Those are things that are happening in real life with this economy. We've got to change.
Thank you. Mr. Fontana.
Mr. Hanson, I mentioned initially that the first job I had out of college was working for a small business in Bridgeport that sold educational software. And I did a variety of things for them for 2 years, everything from writing software to running a printing press. So I got a pretty good handle on some of the things that a small business goes through. After I got my degree in business from Cornell, I then worked for Accenture for 4 years, working with businesses of different size. So I got to see business from both perspectives. As a legislator, I got a chance to work with businesses up at the Capitol year in and year out and get things done for them that they needed to have done. So in 2009, when small businesses came to me and said, you know what, if we lay off somebody, we don't want to have to pay their health care for 90 days before we get to adjust the premium. I changed the law to require that companies take you off the premium 72 hours after laying somebody off or terminating them. In 2010, when they said, you know what, we want to get a quote from companies to include all of our employees, not just the full-time ones, but they won't give us quotes to bring down our rate and allow us to compete with large companies. Can you change the law? I did that. So what I do every day is when I'm out going door to door, I talk to small business owners and I talk about what they need and what they want. And what they're saying to me is taxes are the least concern that we have at this point. It's health care and it's energy. And what I talk to them about is the ideas that I have based on the time that I served in the leadership position in both committees, but what we can actually do to bring down those costs. Because that's how they'll compete with larger companies in Connecticut, and they'll compete nationally and internationally, is bringing down those costs of doing business. So it's addressing those concerns, being able to get things done that I think is important to them. And that's a clear contrast and choice that we have about who can actually not only understand and appreciate what you need, but actually get it done. So like when the realtors came to me in 2010 and said, Steve, we've got to do something about these appraisal management companies that are driving us out of business, making it harder for us to do business, I said, we'll get that done. And I was able to get that done. So it's about delivering the things that you feel you need to help make your business work, understanding and appreciating it, and then getting it done.
Thank you. We have another question from the floor. Betsy Guerra. Can you pass the mic, please?
Connecticut law requires contractors on projects, state and local projects that receive a certain amount of state or local funding to pay a prevailing wage to their employees. And this really increases costs on those local building projects. For example, the town of Durham is recently completing a bathroom facility, and they had, as part of their larger athletic project, and they had local contractors lined up to donate their labor in order to save some money. Unfortunately, they were advised that they cannot use donated labor because of the prevailing wage requirements. And it just seems that this law really hamstrings the ability of towns and local contractors to participate in these local building projects. Do you have any ideas for remedying that situation?
Mr. Fontana?
Betsy, I'm not clear on the specifics about prevailing wage vis-a-vis donated labor. That's a new issue for me, so I can't address that one specifically. As far as prevailing wage is concerned generally, though, my understanding is that we have the highest prevailing wage level in the country. That many other states, if not most states, have far lower thresholds. So we already exempt a large number of small projects. I believe the threshold is $100,000. So if Durham had a project on their bathroom that was more than $100,000, that's an issue. So as you say, it's the donated labor side of it, which I'm not familiar with.
Just to clarify, it was part of a larger building project, so it did reach that threshold.
Okay. Well, having said that, so I think that the important thing to remember about prevailing wage is that's one way that we ensure that we get quality work done, it gets done on time, and we support the ability of people in the middle class to remain in the middle class and not undercut people with out-of-state labor, cheap out-of-state labor, or people who shouldn't even be working in the state, frankly. So I'm always going to look at things, but I think in general, prevailing wage serves a good purpose. The threshold is where it should be right now, and it shouldn't be tinkered with. And if there's an issue about donated labor on a specific project, I'm willing to consider that. But overall, I think it's something that's worked well for us.
Thank you. Senator Fasano.
Thank you. The threshold amounts have been stagnant for a bunch of years, even though construction costs have gone up. And I'm trying to think, it was either 3 or 4 years ago, I sat with union construction guys and non-union construction guys, and we came to an accord that we would raise the threshold amount for new construction and rehabs, which are the 2 levels. And unfortunately, the non-union construction guys refused to say, if we raise it this level, we will, which was taking where it was established, adding dollars of what that would be today, so just dealing with inflation, raise it, that the non-union construction guys would leave this issue off the table for a period of time, and we were going to build an inflation rate in it. So as inflation went up, this number would go up, which made sense to me, because larger projects make sense to some extent to have the prevailing wage. But the non-union guys, the leader of the group at the time, said, came back and said, no, we can't do it. So I couldn't put the deal together, but I tried. As far as exempting out donated work, I got to believe that the unions would not object to a true donation of work. That being carved out, common sense would tell you, because I will tell you, when we did the North Haven High School, if it wasn't for the union guys doing North Haven High School, we would not have our ball fields. They built the dugout, and they put a plaque on it. They donated all those services themselves. Without them, and it was Ben Kazi who got this group together, without them, we wouldn't be able to have that. So that was a big issue. So I think that they would be receptive to that, and it's certainly something, and I agree with Steve, that's something we could take a look at to carve that out. If it was truly, they want to be concerned there isn't any other things going on, but if it was truly donated, I think that's a reasonable request and something that could be looked at on a smaller thing.
Thank you. We have time for one last question or two.
Maybe one.
Maybe one. One quick one. No pressure, but who would like the ending statement? It looks like our co-chair, Kelly Bertucci, would like the last word.
Well,
Kelly,
I'll
please.
ask a question in the absence of one from the audience. We've heard sort of a recurring theme, both on job tours and some of the forums that we've had from businesses, large and small, that in many ways fees, permitting, regulatory environments can sometimes be a little bit more difficult to manage than, frankly, taxes, that's really more of a concern. How do we go about taking a look at some of those laws that we have today that may not necessarily make common sense, and try to spur private sector investment to eliminate some of those older, outdated laws that exist? How do you recommend that we go about taking a look at that holistically, and are there any particular areas that you would target to see that type of review take place first?
Thank you. We'll be starting with Senator Fasano. We'll ask for 1 minute responses.
I think there's a host of things you can do. A host of things that you can do. First of all, for those who've ever developed, you got to work with UI, then you got to work with the local water company, then you got to work with the sewer department. Each one wants a separate easement. Each one wants a map that's an A2 survey that is on the title block to UI or to the WPCA. We could make it so that you could give one map that's A2 survey. It does not have to be to the particular, to the particular utility company. That would streamline it. I don't know why these utility companies, can't get together and have like a group that says, okay, this project is going forward, where do you need an easement, where do you need an easement, where do you need an easement? From a state level, why can't there be one application, that all the information's on one application, and then you send that to all the different agencies, and they all get them at the same time. I got 15 seconds. So what you got to do, send them to all the different agencies, rather than doing one application for them with the same duplicate stuff that you're sending to this, the same duplicate stuff that you're sending to that. Then you meet with them, and they say, DOT says no road cut here, DP says no road cut over there. So you need more collaboration. I'm out of time.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Fontana.
2 points. First is, we have a regulations review committee, and clearly their job is to review new regulations. But it seems to me that one of the things they can and should be doing is reviewing old ones too. And so if there isn't currently, there ought to be a process whereby you or anybody here can be able to approach them, petition them if you will, and say, we'd like you to relook at these regulations to see whether they can in fact be changed, and to work with the agencies to try to get that done. Beyond that, I would tell you, I think it's always helpful if you approach the people who have the ability to do something about regulations and have a specific fix that you'd like to see. There have been plenty of people who came to me when I was Vice Chair of Planning and Development for 8 years and said, we want you to change all these things. And I'd say, okay, well, which ones matter to you? They all do. Well, I understand they all do, but when you have a very broad approach, you can attract a lot of specific opposition. And so we can work through things much more effectively if you have a specific kind of application or specific kind of problem, I think, than just generally saying, well, fix all of regulations, fix all of the regulatory system at once.
Thank you very much. On behalf of our legislative committee and the great work that Robin and the team do, and Liz for legislative activity, thank you for coming out and joining the spirit of democracy here that is alive. Get out and vote, please. I'll invite Robin Wilson up to the podium. Let's give her a round of applause for everything she's done.
I want to, again, just extend thank yous to Ulbrich and to our two panelists, to our four panelists and to our two candidates here for taking the time to do this. It's really important. I have a couple of quick announcements coming up in this month. One would be our Athena Awards, which is going to be held at Villa Capri on Thursday, October 18th, which is this Thursday. Tremendous event, international. We're flying in the president of the organization. You're going to have a great time if you come. Another thing, I'd like you to take out a pencil, because this was done before it was put on there, but take out a pencil and jot down, please, or take out your phones. Show and Sell in North Haven is going to be happening on October 27th at North Haven High School from 10 to 3. It's a fabulous program. It's community-oriented, businesses, nonprofits, everything you can think of, a lot of fun. On a Saturday, which I'm sure is going to be beautiful, October 27th at North Haven High School. Again, Christine, Betsy, Andy, and Kelly, I thank you, and I encourage everyone on November 6th to please get out and vote. No matter who you vote for, vote. Thank you very much again.
To order a DVD copy of this program, call 203-234-0025 or visit our website at nhtv.com.